and welcome back to Scale Me Down and to part 2 of this series where we build, fly and review the 1 to 12 Tiger Moth radio control flying model kit from the Tony Ray range. Please like and subscribe to support the channel. This model kit was supplied for review by Model Shop Leeds, and I'll pop a link in the description below as to where you can get yours. In the last episode we constructed the fuselage and landing gear, and in this episode I'd like to show you how I put together the flying surfaces, the wings, struts and tail surfaces, etc. So let's get started. We'll start by finding and freeing all the wing parts from their carrier sheets. The ribs are then slid down the main spar, paying particular attention because there's subtle differences between some of the ribs and also differences between the top and bottom wings. Then I can pin down the secondary spar and trailing edge flat to the board, and notice here how I cross the pins over the wood. Now we can add the main spar and ribs, easing each rib into its respective slot. With all 4 wing panels laid out and pinned down flat like this, I can now wick thin superphatic glue into all the joints. Notice the different labelling for the ribs on the top set of wings. RT is all very logical. That's the basic wing structure completed. And I'm always surprised that when we add together all these lightweight, delicate components, just how strong and stiff the final structure is. Now, also flat on the board, we can add the tips, the riblets, leading edges, roots and ailerons, etc. The root ribs are laminated up from 2 parts each, and because there's a left hand and a right hand rib, I lay them up symmetrically like this to make sure we don't make 2 left-handed ones. In the kit there are these 2 dihedral jigs. I'm going to use these now to set the root rib, so let's just get that done. Adding PVA glue just where it's needed with a small brush. Now we can use the included laser cut template to accurately set the angle of the root rib. Note how I have omitted these 2 riblets and sheeting while we sort out the wing root fixings. These are G10 epoxy board, and I freed them from their carrier sheet using a Dremel. But I found them to be a terrible sloppy fit in the fuselage and spar ends until I found these components in the hardware bag to laminate them to. It's just there's no mention of them in the instructions. I roughened the surface of the G10 with sandpaper before laminating with CA. Then I sanded them down until they fit properly. When I glued the fittings into the spar ends using 30-minute epoxy, I ensured that the wings were in twist by pinning down the roots flat to the board and supporting the tips at the correct height for the dihedral. Once the epoxy had cured, I removed each wing panel in turn and bound the spars and fittings using cotton thread and CA. To ensure the incidence and alignment of the upper set of wings, I made up some special jigs from scrap material. They have a cutout to clear the bottom set of wings, and the bottom and top are parallel to also set the top wings parallel to the board. Of course, there's no guidance in the instructions as to how to set up the wings on a biplane such as this. Although, in fairness, all the fixings did line up very accurately with their respective holes, testament to the quality of this kit. Now that I've completed all the sheeting, riblets and all the blocks to support the servos and the wing struts, etc., we now need to round the leading edges and provide a final sand before we cover the wings. And to do that, I've turned over the building board and I've used the flat surface to stick down a piece of 240 grit sandpaper. You have to go very carefully with this so that you don't bust any of the ribs. And taking a bit of time now will pay dividends when the model is covered. For the last job on the wings, you'll need a razor saw to cut through all the ribs and separate the ailerons. Notice how the aileron facings have the slots for the hinges pre-cut and also an etched centerline to make chamfering easier. The struts are a simple sandwich of Polonia and Balsa. And then the kit includes these tiny screw-in eyelets to fasten it all together. These will be permanently fitted after covering, but there was some confusion from the instructions as to which way the mounting blocks should go. On a Tiger Moth, the wing strut mounts are parallel to the ribs, despite the aircraft being swept. The kit includes parts for quick build tail feathers, or alternatively a built-up structure with laminated leading and trailing edges. I cut out the templates for this from scrap plywood, which I covered in parcel tape to stop the parts sticking. I had to supply my own 1mm balsa, which I soaked in water and bent around the templates, laminating with PVA. The remaining parts and stripwood are included, however, and are laid up over the plan in a traditional manner. However, although it saves some weight, I wouldn't bother, as to me the finished structures felt a bit flimsy. I chose to add a 1mm carbon spar, and also to try this carbon tissue from Deluxe Materials, which I used to laminate the trailing edge with CA. I also replaced the elevator joiner with 2mm carbon rod. I struggled to get the cowl to fit as it didn't seem wide enough, and in fact I broke it trying. It is actually quite strong, and after dunking in hot water for a few moments, it easily conformed to the shape of the fuselage and fit. The covering to finish this model was also sponsored by model shop Leeds. It's Aura cover light, which is perfect for a model like this. And to help the process, I'm going to apply some Deluxe Materials covering grip to the edges. I'll be using a few extra tools for this process, which is a bit beyond the scope of this video. So here's a few shots of the progress. I actually hate film covering, but once it's done, at least I can assemble the plane for the last time. Just on that note, assembly is fiddly as this is a small model. I found a 0.75mm drill bit held in a pin vise useful for clearing out some of the holes, and also with a knife for clearing out the glue from some of the hinge slots. However, Tony's hardware is top quality and I used all of it, with the exception of some servo screws with points for putting the landing gear on, as it was just a bit easier. There was no information provided with Tony's motor, so I decided to run a test through my watt meter, and this is the setup I came up with. And this setup produces 80 watts at full power. Although not included, I added this hardwood block to accept the cowl screw. I also reinforced the inside around the holes and the repair from where I broke it earlier. You have to be very careful and precise to avoid the motor or the propeller from brushing the cowl. And the propeller securing nut is an M5 Nylock left-hand thread. The model balanced perfectly before I even added the battery, which I fixed with Velcro to a block between the two cockpits. Now to the fun stuff, including my own pilot, the pre-cut windscreens that I outlined in silver paint marker, and there's even some leather included for the cockpit head bumpers. The kit includes rigging, but I decided to fit the front set of landing and flying wires only. There's plenty of this fine braided fishing line and brass crimps supplied, but again not much direction. Securing the wires through the little eyelets I talked about earlier, I took my time to ensure I didn't introduce any warps. Let's take a look at the finished, rather handsome model that emerges from this modest box. I used all of Tony's included hardware as it's of great quality, although I do think his hinges are a bit stiff, and I did replace one or two of the small screws with small flanged servo screws with points to make them easier to fit. If I was building this model again, my only change would be to use the quick build tail surfaces. And I did overshoot the 250 gram weight target just a tiny bit. So if you need to keep yours under, you need to consider your choice of adhesives and covering carefully. Join us next time for part 3, where we'll see just how she flies. And in the meanwhile, please like and subscribe, and if you wish to get your hands on your own one of these well-designed little kits, I'll pop a link in the description below. Thanks for watching.